Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Brian Curtis. He's an author, a healer, a counselor, and he teaches people how to breathe so that they can create an internal growth cycle that lasts. This is going to be an awesome conversation. You'll want to stick around. So do so, and we'll be right back. Hey, Brian, it's so great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know it's going to be great. Thank
I
you.
think it will be. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, the process that we go through and the purpose of the show is to share this inner reality that's happening with most people that we don't talk about for fear of being deemed crazy or weird or, somehow put aside because of that. When really we live half inside and half outside, and we need to talk about what's going on inside because that's what we're bereft of doing in order to create this cohesion in the relationships that we develop, especially now in this transition that we're experiencing globally, in the economy and in how people respond to each other, coming out of this obsession of self-hygiene and sequestration that hopefully got people to do some self-examination and address life a little differently. So for you, and I know with the work that you do, the mind that you, the heart that you have, there had to have been some early connections that you recognized with an inner awareness, voice, visions, whatever it may have been. I'm sure you'll um, share that with us. How did that begin, and what did you notice, and what was life like for you, and how you saw yourself compared to others?
That's a really good question. And I really appreciate the way you worded the COVID thing. Um, so yeah, I mean, this is a question I don't think anybody's ever asked me. So I appreciate the question.
You're very welcome.
Uh, yeah, I mean, from an early age, I never felt like I was separate from anybody. And it was because I was experiencing a lot of my father's pain. My dad went through a lot of pain growing up. He was diagnosed with a slow mind when he was young, but he was an ADD kid, and he was always in his own head all the time, and so
Hmm.
he had a lot of fears growing up, a lot of things that he felt like he failed at, not understanding that he wasn't dumb, and a lot of his family knew that he wasn't dumb, but uh, he struggled in a lot of ways and had a lot of frustrations, and then naturally took that on family. Or there was other family traumas that he was experiencing, but experiencing that and not having a really good relationship with my father just because of how he was, and
Hmm.
he spent
Sounds
more,
like he was the epitome of an introvert.
yeah, very introverted, and so he didn't have a really good relationship with his older brother, which meant that he saw me being the oldest child. He spent more time with the younger children, and so it pulled me into a lot of introspection.
Hmm.
Who am I? Why am I here? At the same time, being very empathic and feeling where the other people are at and how people are viewing, because we project the way that we view ourselves to our environment, right?
Great
So,
insight.
right. Something that I didn't realize until later in life that I was doing to myself, that because that's usually we attract relationships that are viewing the world the same way that we are. We're viewing ourselves, right?
Or close, right?
Yeah,
Something that's
they're
somewhat
similar.
compatible, right?
They're similar, but yeah. And so I didn't think much of myself growing up. I didn't really, I tried to not even put any label on myself. And I remember having experiences when people were um, calling me names. Like you see, I've got these big ears here. But when I was younger, I had these big ears that really stuck out, And people would make fun of me when I was younger. And I remember not being in the body when people do that. I remember looking at myself from the top down, kind of disembodying myself, right? Because you kind of separate yourself from the pain of the projected pain of somebody else. You know, when people are doing things like that, they're just projecting their own pain. And a lot of times we don't even realize that people are doing that. We
Right.
take it
And
personal.
yet when you feel it as empathic as you were, that's pretty painful. It's like, is this me or is
Right.
it someone else? How did you, because that I believe is one of the core points of recognition and observation. Is it me or am I just so sensitive that I'm feeling others and the ability to check in, self-observe and self-examine and reflect?
Yeah.
How did you find that um, key feature? Because you've obviously did, especially by what you just mentioned.
Well, knowing that somebody is projecting a false identity and letting it go in the emotional body are two totally separate things, right? I mean, you can have a knowing of something, but a lot of times we don't even realize that you're holding something in the emotional body and
Hmm.
let go of it until much later. We have this image of ourselves and how we interact with other people and how other people see us, not knowing that that's actually something we're holding on in the emotional body. It's a subconscious, feeling in the,
And almost programmed, right?
yeah,
Because we have a lot of belief systems of one, which I'm probably going to catch hell with on making this comment. We've got one that has two major religions that came out of it that still believe women came from men.
right.
And that just, when you've got something set up that we know, yes, there's some miraculous things that can happen. However, looking at how women have been made to be subservient throughout both of those religions is just ridiculous. And it spills out into professional environments still today.
Yeah, it's a false sense of identity,
Yeah,
right? Is all it is. It's not like you can take on the male form or female form. It doesn't mean that you're not both masculine and feminine at the same time.
absolutely.
So, you know, yeah, that point of view is part of the conversation because it's just a misunderstanding of who we are that we project onto our environment. And then if you are continue get programmed that way, then you'll misinterpret even the way where other people are at. You
Sure.
might, take it personally and say, oh, wait, that person is in a really sad state. I need to be empathic, I need to be respond in the right way to that person to help ground
Now we
out.
know that now,
Yeah.
right? But the prior generations, our parents, stoic, right? Men, don't show your feelings. Do everything that's necessary. Just be that emotional robot
Right.
that has to get things done no matter what. And if they showed a sense of empathy or feelings, they were deemed not part of the crowd.
Yeah.
Now, today, that's completely different because, as you mentioned, we've got that masculine and feminine energy with us. We feel, we think. Those are two different aspects.
Yeah. And the thinking body moves the emotional body. We don't even realize it, and vice versa. We'll have,
Does it? And the reason I'm asking is because, the three brain system, another kind of ancient philosophy,
sure.
indigenous, gut, heart, head. First brain's the gut, second brain's the heart, third brain's the head. As we know with quantum physics now, everything's energy. Where would you feel that? And why would we not understand that the intuition is that sensory capacity we have?
Yeah, like a deeper knowing. You're just
Right.
talking about a deeper knowing.
Then, based on where that resonates or doesn't, then in the heart center, you've got a opportunity of distilling that and deciding whether, okay, is this desirable or undesirable? Because that's a sense that the brain and heart work together. Then with that information, we move into the head and make better choices as to how to manage that or what to do with it rather than think something and want to shove it into everything down the body and wonder why we have all kinds of disease today or
Yeah.
dis-ease. So how does that, now reflecting on that, does that
Yeah, I would agree with
sense?
that. I
And
think,
in addition, I didn't want to discount what you just said. It was an and. It was an
right.
and rather than a but.
Yeah. You have different minds resonate at different frequencies that are working all together, right, to
Mhm.
create a greater mind. It's like worlds within worlds, right?
Right.
Uh, right. So you've always got frequency in the field. You've got number of times and the energy that gets moved depending on how many number of times it is, the
Mhm.
creation cycle and the attraction cycle that's
Well, let's
happening.
go back to that chart because I think this is really important, and so people have an opportunity just to at least to listen to another who's been through this and can articulate things from a more objective place and looking back and say, okay, here's kind of what happened, right?
Sure.
So in that younger or in those younger years, do you recall what kinds of things, thoughts, feelings, and um, I don't want to say assertions, but observations that you were then allowed or able to incorporate that took you to a different or better level of being able to navigate through the world that you were experiencing?
Yeah. Well, it got worse before it gets better. It always does that because if you're not like I wasn't aware of how much pain I was holding on to that I had sucked up from my environment when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And so I was always sympathetic to everybody around me, loved everybody around me unconditionally, but I didn't reflect that back on myself because um I didn't realize that I wasn't doing that. So
Yeah.
I,
Didn't
I
feel like
just
you
would
knew enough, were good enough, was present enough, all those kinds of self-deprecating thoughts that we have amongst those 70,000 that we have a day. How many of
right.
those do you think that, acknowledging that, if you will, how many percentage-wise might you guess of those 70,000 thoughts a day, which the brainiacs, the neuro geeks say they've discovered. How many thoughts or what percentage of that do you think are self-deprecating before one begins to become
Oh,
aware?
on average, I would say at least like three quarter, you know, uh, you just meet people and there's a lot of I can't, right?
Mm,
Uh, that could you always feel limited in how I have to do this or this is going to happen to me, right? You're always living in some kind of preconceived outcome of what might happen. So it's always starts with I can't do this or this will happen. So you're always limiting your own ability to create, if that makes sense, right?
absolutely, it makes sense because, and it's true, right? That's the first, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I can't. I heard that growing up from other kids, and I'm like, well,
Why?
why not? Can we do this? I don't know. Let's try.
Yeah,
Wow, what a novel idea. And it's amazing what you can do when you don't know you can't.
right. And then the first thing that comes up against you when you even present that idea to somebody, say, like, don't say you can't. Okay, I'll just tell you to jump off a cliff. Tell me to jump off a cliff. What's going to happen, right? That's the first response usually you get.
Right, the ridiculousness of it all
Right.
and the avoidance of the
Avoiding the fact that they're reducing themselves. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So how did you get in touch with that and work through it? And I know you like me, right? We're still doing that. How, however, it's gotten a little easier over the years. In those tough times, what did you find that got you through?
It all came to a culmination of an event, after I started seeing somebody and, they left me for certain reasons and didn't matter why, they were just started seeing somebody else. But you take that, I took it personally and I was carrying all that pain, not realizing that I had naturally attracted somebody that was just verifying the state of being that I'd been in for so, so long.
Hmm.
And finally it came to awakening one night where I just kind of cried out. So just, just let this go. I love this person unconditionally, no matter what's happening. I just don't care. And I felt this burst, this flooding energy that just kind of washed me from head to toe. And then boom, I was asleep because I had been holding on to so much pain, not realizing it was all emotional pain. Uh, that when you get released from that, it's like boom, your body immediately goes to rest because your body can't
Right. It's like,
rest.
whew, finally. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't rest if you're in that state.
Yeah.
And so the next morning I woke up in a really high vibrational state. I mean, it felt like I was almost kind of out of body. And I
So
remember,
do you remember, you mentioned a high vibrational state. Was there a tingling? What kind of sensations did you have? How could you further describe what that was like?
yeah, I mean, have you ever stood next to a high voltage line where it's just kind of buzzing at 60 hertz?
Yeah, you can feel it.
It's,
You can hear
your
it.
whole body
Sometimes
is
you can
just going,
feel it. Yeah.
uh, kind of that state, but at a much higher frequency, like whole body vibrating at a much, much higher frequency, but moving in the same way, where there's enough energy moving through you that it feels like all the molecularly your whole body is just
Hmm.
vibrating super,
Now,
super
would
fast.
you describe that as an effervescent, iridescent, high-pitched sensation?
Yeah, yes, you could say that. Yeah,
Right.
right.
We had a pre-con or pre-show conference, if you will, where I mentioned that was, happened to me as a teenager. In that, this effervescent, high-pitched, iridescent sensation, what do you have this when you go into that quiet space and you seek the silence within? What comes up first, or does it kind of resolve to that sensation?
Not, I mean, I can get that sensation if I dive into it and try to achieve it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Generally, it depends on what kind of meditation I'm doing. If I'm just trying to open myself to information, uh, yeah, I think there's different ways to meditate. If you can concentrate on different states of being in meditation, right? You've done meditations for years.
Mhm.
You can meditate on thought form. You can meditate on what you're feeling in the body. The two prime differences there. Also you can obviously focus on specific parts of the body and try to feel how the body's resonating.
A little more disciplined practice, but yes.
Yeah,
And yes.
right. Plus, there's obviously a lot of different meditation techniques for that, and then that is a more disciplined practice where you're focusing your mind on what's happening there. Uh,
What if that sensation was available always? And I'm saying that kind of self-revealing, I guess, is that since my experience as a teen, any quiet moment, I hear that. I feel that effervescent, high-pitched sensation really slightly, right?
yeah,
And yet it's there in the
it's there.
background, between thoughts, between words. If I'm really paying attention and observing it, it is always there.
Yeah.
What might that be an indicator of based on the vibratory rates and the things that we are working on allowing to be present in ourselves, our connection to the divine in specific.
Right. I think we're more connected to that state the less we're holding on to specific thought forms, right?
Mhm.
Or like fears, anxieties, or regrets, guilts. One comes from the past, one comes from the future, so you're not present. Gets you out of that state where everything's moving because nothing's moving in the future. Nothing's moving in the past. It's all moving right now.
Right. Now, how do we, let me preface this question. I was taught at one point how to measure auras. and there was a woman trained in the Huna methodologies, and she used dowsing rods. And I was really curious. I saw she was doing a workshop up in Prescott, a couple hours away. So I made sure I made it there early so I could talk to her and kind of, query. I love, showing up early to things because that's when the cool stuff really happens. And you can often find somebody to speak with personally rather than in a group.
Yeah.
So she said, well, here, let me show you a simple process. You meditate on the past, go to an event, picture yourself there, really feel it. She started from the other corner of the room. So it was a 40-foot square room. I was in one corner, she was in the other corner, the hypotenuse, if you will. And she would clear the rods and walk towards me. In the past and the future, they opened up in the same place, which
Right.
is about 6 feet in front of me. Then she picks up a rock from the windowsill next to me. She puts it in my hand. She says, here, now focus on this. She barely got 2 steps in from the other side of the room before the rods opened. So that's a difference of nearly 50 feet. So past and present, 6 foot. Past and future, 6 feet. Present, without even trying, 50 feet. That's exponentiated.
Yeah.
Now, what if we were able to really understand that, and especially with quantum physics now, we understand it's all energy. Do you think that kind of focused energy is going to have an effect on the people in that 50-foot radius, 100-foot diameter circle?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. You have a much higher effect on the people around you when you're present versus if you're not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, how we'll get to that because I'm going to come back. We'll circle around. In the period that when you were a teenager and early years of, college years, things like that, how did you grapple with this understanding and choosing a direction to go in life?
Well, after that event, I had no idea. I was in that state for probably 3 or 4 days, and it slowly tapered off, no matter what I thought, because it was like
What
I
age were you?
I was 24.
Okay.
Um, and then after that, I kind of went on a soul journey. I got on my parents' motorhome and went back east and I was just going to do a fast. Because I had, reading from the Bible. I was raised in Christian churches,
Mhm.
and it seemed like all the people, especially in the Bible, the three people that were on the Mount of
Transfiguration.
Transfiguration, yeah, Moses, Elijah, Jesus, in their light bodies, were the only four people or three people that went on a 40-day fast in the Bible. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go on a fast. Let's see what happens. Third day on my fast, I was drinking, I was living on hot chocolate. I'm 24 years old, driving a motorhome back east.
Oh my God.
And day three, I had a dream. I was in a car, it was like a Flintstone car, where you run on the bottom, there's no motor. And I'm trying to drive this car, and I'm trying to go up a hill, running with my feet on the ground. And I had two avatars that felt like other versions of myself in the back seat, and they were laughing at me. I could tell that they were laughing at me. Like what I was doing was just, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just going in a direction. And so I woke up the next morning, and I thought, I got this feeling like I shouldn't be trying to fast right now. I'm wasting my time. And so after that day, I just finished my journey, and I was going to see some friends of the family that were in the church. Somebody amazing to me that was really one of my mentors growing up. His name was David Ebaugh. He invented one of the uh, a part for IBM when he was in the Navy. He actually was in the Navy with Ross Perot. Was
Hmm.
good friends with Ross Perot. And after he invented that part, it was a typewriter part for IBM. He was self-made, and he spent all of his time researching, meditating, he could get himself to the alpha state really easily. And so he would uh, channel messages for people personally. And so he was a destination for me
Well,
that
now that's an odd combination, isn't it?
right.
Right?
Yeah. He was an amazing person. He had built the whole Temple of Solomon on a wall on a board, kind of like a third size, and had done so much research, not just about the Bible, but religious texts, all religious
Hmm.
texts. Had a huge library. He told me something that a really interesting story that I'll share with you. He was in the Navy, and he one thing he learned that kept getting returned to him was that you just kind of do what you're told, kind of your inner guidance, what your inner guidance is telling you to do.
Hmm.
Because if you're not doing what you're told, you're usually running off paths in some way. Um, yeah, he had a lot of interesting things. And interestingly enough, after I saw him that year, he died of cancer just shortly after that. I never saw him again. But so this was in 2002, I believe. So this was 22 years ago now. So yeah,
So gleaning that understanding from him, and obviously, the fact that he did so much research and looked for, no doubt, what a golden thread through it all was. Is
right.
that safe to say?
Oh yeah. I actually ended up writing a book in college after that, after I met him, that was based on a book that he had written, El Elyon Now. He wrote a book about the names of God in the Bible and how there was parts of the Bible that was actually corrupted. I think it's Exodus 6, 2, and 3, where it's obvious that the people before then weren't aware of the name Yahweh, yet that word is used before that verse. Uh, if you just read that verse,
Mhm.
you might not be familiar with it, but there's like 30 names of God in the Bible, but different aspects of that state of
Right.
being.
Well, the Kabbalah or the Jewish tradition, 72 names God, 36 lesser and
Yeah.
36 greater is what they call them. And, we often like to separate them as angels and demons, not realizing that both of them steer us toward the one. One
Right.
gives us the memo, the others test it.
Right. Yeah.
That's as simple as it is. And we like to project all this evilness and things, there are some evil humans, but in the spirit world and beyond, from my experience and others, there's no malevolent energies there. There's just that which wants you to be your best.
Yeah. You're just moving out of conflict the whole time and
Yeah.
becoming closer to oneness.
Yeah.
So born into darkness, moving into light, that.
Yeah. Well, and that echoes the ancient texts like the Vedas, right? We're all divine threads, incarnate, connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well, what's it mean to have God consciousness? What's it mean to you?
To me,
Yeah.
I think it's an ever steady state of being. That's like always being at one with everything around you, and where everybody's at, because it's all a growth process. When you look at the
Hmm.
whole thing, there isn't anything that isn't growing. So just knowing that if it's always growing, then you should never really be in conflict with the fact that something's growing. If it's hard to grow, then you're going to be in conflict with yourself, right?
Right. Do you feel that the chaos that we experience is possibly just patterns we don't recognize yet within ourselves that we haven't resolved in order to find that harmony?
Yeah, one message that I've always gotten that I keep getting repeatedly for myself, and that I know I can't speak to anything else, is that recognize the relatedness of things instead of trying to say things are one way or the other, right? Um, because everything's related.
Hmm.
It's always everyone is slowly creating a more powerful vessel that's moving more of themselves.
Sure. And we're all in our own relationships on the ocean of emotion, being buffeted about, seeking safe harbor with others.
Yeah, right.
Now, how do we do that, right? With this knowledge that we are capable of God consciousness, that doesn't mean that we are the one or God, the ultimate creator. No, it means that we're capable of creating for ourselves.
Right.
Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Now, in that creating for yourself, that, no man is an island, right? So we still have to work with others in order to find who we resonate with and begin to work together. This is where I feel that, we've been told for a long time there was going to be a consciousness shift or a transformation of humanity, if you will, in some way, shape, or form. And it's throughout all the religions, it's in all the calendars that this period of time that we're in is probably that time, right? Now, how might that be? What evidence might we see that is beyond anything of our own control and yet happened to show us? So, and I feel, for one, that this period we had of self-obsession and sequestration was that. It gave everybody a chance to stop, look, listen, inquire, self-examine, and peer into themselves. Because what else can you do when you're by yourself and you're sequestered,
Yeah.
right? And that behavioral modification, unscheduled, unsuspected, probably even unforeseen in those who might have triggered this event, still the evidence is that people started changing their lives. They started looking for each other. Virtual groups popped up all over the place with similar modes and operating in ways that sought to understand more and share greater harmony with self, with others in business and society.
Yeah. Yeah, the most difficult part, I think, and you see this in business, is a way to ground that out and work together at the same time when it's a lot more equal so that you're not driving each other away from each other. Right.
Right. There's no ladder climbing. There's no backstabbing. There's,
Yeah.
right. It's just we're all sharing this. We each have, and this is where that back to the Vedanic philosophy of individual threads in the divine tapestry. We each have our roles. And if you look at it from that perspective and apply quantum physics, well, there's a certain frequency that we have individuated that fits into the whole. So it's possible then that we could have what I call a perfected form, fit, and function. Not that it's perfect, right? The perfected means it's specific to each of us. And
Right.
that individuated thread has a direct connect to source and infinite intelligence specific to the individual, which may apply to others, but it starts with the individual.
Yeah.
How does that meet the standards for creating businesses that are agile?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an evolution of enough people individually to bring enough people together, right? I mean, I think we're witnessing it now this year, to be perfectly honest. I think if you look at the transitory state that are at, I mean, right now we're at the summer solstice.
Mhm.
Uh, Everybody I know in my personal lives and in the business community, I've met so many people recently. It feels like all of them are in a transitory state,
Yeah. I'm not
from
sure
one
what's
phase to
up.
the other.
And yet there's this combination of pensive and embrace, inclusion. Um,
Yeah.
those two, I know it sounds paradoxical, maybe even a poor juxtaposition. However, there's this dynamic, and we see it maybe as duality that we're attempting to merge into some form of an idea of oneness. We understand the concept of oneness. Even Dudley Lynch, um, great writer, he wrote a book called The Strategy of the Dolphin back in the 80s, organizational development wise. Eventually, he wrote another book called The Mother of All Minds. And in that, he posits that we are alpha chassis and alpha minds. This is where we were, the alpha mind steeped in competition. Now we still have the same alpha chassis, but we've got a beta mind that now has, perhaps even from the harmonic convergence that escalated consciousness and awareness, 100-fold, if not exponentiated.
Yeah.
It gives us a beta mind, which understands the concept of oneness. Doesn't necessarily know how to apply it specifically,
Right.
right? Because that's what we're learning. We've got to grok the concept first, and then through inquiry, back it out to where, it's kind of like the entrepreneur with a vision that, you start with the end in mind, and then you back out how to get there.
Yeah. You just take steps towards it and try and retrace your steps after you've already visualized where you're going to be, right?
Right. Well, you have that epiphany like you did and like I have, right? And that's just, it blows your mind for a little bit. Now what do you do? Right.
Yeah.
How
It's
do
a
you
planet.
decipher all of, yeah, how do you unfold that? How do you allow it to unfold in yourself? And what kinds of questions did you find were most important in initiating that process?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of patience. I think patience is about because you realize, and I made a post about this the other day. I watched the movie Oppenheimer, and obviously,
Hmm.
building an atomic bomb isn't the best idea to apply to this. But Oppenheimer knew he was a genius, and he
Mhm.
knew that he could not do it by himself. He knew that he had to have a group of people and connect them in the right way because he was connecting a group of minds that could potentially do what they proposed, where no one person could do it.
Right.
And that's why they were successful, because not only that, but they moved the people that,
Teamwork makes the dream work.
yeah, they, sorry about that, but my dad's phone is very loud. Uh, Connecting those people and their families too, because he knew that if they didn't, there's no way that you can get people to connect without their families, but they needed to live together to experience one another and grow together, because if they didn't, then there's no way they could accomplish it.
Right.
I think, I mean, just me and you meeting on a virtual platform like this, there's no way that you and I could work together on a daily basis to create something together like this, right? You really have to, um, you got to live with people and work together
It's
in a
personal
system.
touch. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Even carried it through in the business plan that I wrote for Model Community after teaching high school for a number of years, in that it was based on holistic education, which includes body, mind, spirit, planet, and cosmos. And in order for, it was originally designed for at-risk students, and so
Right.
the at-risk students have their own domiciles, 6 to 8 per with a supervisor. And then on the exterior are their parents' homes or dwellings, at least temporary, to where the families are all there as well. Because you can't separate, in my opinion, and heal at the same time.
No, you're constantly growing closer and figuring out how you're serving one another in the right way, because you're constantly learning more about yourself and moving more energy in the body. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
We definitely are going that direction. It's just, um, you have to point the right resources together in the right way. Right. Yeah.
well, and part of that, it seems like you were saying, we're in that crux place where we realize, oh, stuff has to change, right? We feel it. We're being part of it. Some are being drug kicked and screaming through it.
Yeah, right.
Um, and yet some are also on the forefront of it, looking, having experienced, having learned how to articulate, having learned how to be a servant leader, how to reach back and share the simple steps to get there. Now, the thing that seems to be for me, the idea, the notion of how simple this process of finding yourself and integrating that is, we tend to make it way too complex. There's a litany of things, of disciplines, of practices, of routines, of rituals, all
Yeah.
these kinds of books, right? When none of that really matters.
No, I don't have to do this at 6 a.m. and then do this at 7 a.m. And then, yeah, I mean, it's structuring it that way gets a little bit, yeah,
I will say it works temporarily because an undisciplined mind needs structure
exactly.
initially in order to learn the discipline and the process of it.
Right.
Then you can, it's like you got to learn how to swing a golf club before you can really hit the ball well.
Right. Well, I mean, when you think about it, if you were living in a community of people, you couldn't just randomly do things at certain times. You would need structure. This is when we do this, this is when we do that, or else
Right. There's another
everybody's
new
in the
movie
wrong
out.
place at the wrong time. You're
Yeah,
just random particles.
you mentioned Oppenheimer. My wife and I have been just finished the Snowpiercer series.
Okay.
What a example of society it is, and the situations that we have to face and work through, and ways of doing that, good ways and bad, or I'll put it this way, desirable and undesirable because of the results that happen, right?
Yeah.
You do something that's not desirable, and people get hurt. Sometimes you do things that are desirable and people get hurt.
Yeah.
That is usually from the resistance and,
I
and
don't
the
think there's any way to keep people from getting hurt because as an individual, we hurt ourselves, if we bang on our head
true,
against the wall. So,
true. And because of that, because of that anger we hold in, we end up unleashing it on another. And, it's like my intros to the show, namaste and inla. Namaste comes from the Sanskrit. It means that the divine in me worships the divine in you. And inla comes from the Mayan, which means it's a shortened form of I am another you.
yeah.
So when we're all individuated. Yes, we're individuated. However, we're all part of this collective, and we affect each other, some subtly, some profoundly. How do you see understanding this transition and the work that you're doing with the healing and the counseling, the coaching, and as connected as you are, how do you see, or what trends do you see currently that give a better indication that this process at least is in process, and the results are beginning to show in things that are showing up in the world?
I think it's forcing a larger portion of the percentage into self-mastery. It's like the old hierarchical structure of the strong preying upon the weak is going to flip, where the people that were the strong, who depended on the external reality, are going to fall prey to the new strong who have relied on the internal reality.
That sounds oddly like "and the meek shall inherit the earth."
Right. Because the meek are the ones that become the strongest when
Because they've endured.
yeah, you've endured, you went through the fire,
Yeah,
you uh before anybody else. You had to go through the fire before anybody else.
because the aggressive competitive programming just didn't feel right or true
Right.
or comfortable. Now, granted, part of this growth process that on an individual level, you got to put yourself in uncomfortable places because that's where the growth occurs. That's where
Yeah.
you stretch yourself
Yeah.
and still recognize that there's nothing to fear.
Right.
It's just you facing yourself and eventually acquiescing to that state of God consciousness where you can, for lack of a better, I want to say command, but that I don't want to skew this with a command and control kind of aspect,
Right.
where you can request things and put your attention, intention, and interaction toward them, and the universe, God, however you want to call it, has those things show up for you. It's just you then have to be aware enough to recognize when they do.
Yeah.
Now, how did that, understanding that process, and I know you do because you experience it, how would you explain it and what are the indicators that it's in process and working?
I would say that you're constantly being tested. And because you'll always be forced to connect with your higher self, to channel from your higher self, a higher version of yourself.
Mhm.
Because if you're ever worried about tomorrow, or you're worried about something else, it's going to pull you into a survivor fight or flight syndrome where you're not going to be connected in the right way, uh, if that makes sense, right?
It
It's
makes
like
perfect sense.
stressing it constantly until you get to where there's no stress. You're just state of being.
Relax.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's
Rest
get
in the
together on
arms
the
of the
porch.
dragon. There was a little snippet out of a movie, um, I don't remember what, but there was a guy talking to a wizard, and he says, "But what should I do? What should I do?" He says, "Do nothing."
Right.
Right? Rest in the arms of the dragon. Dream, dream.
Yeah.
Right? And so these are, there's indications of these kinds of things all over the place. When you begin looking, the thing is, you got to start looking. And what do you find prompts those looky-loos to begin with? That doesn't mean they're engaging, right? Because that's another step. But uh, what do you think are those indicators and how might one be advised by you?
Uh, boy. I guess you're just learning to ground out the positive and the negative that you will experience. A lot of times it's projected from your environment, um, blocking out the things that are kind of, I guess, trying to feed off of you energetically. And just because once you
Okay.
get to a state of being, uh,
So let's drill down to those. There's two things you mentioned there,
right.
grounding and blocking. What does grounding mean?
Grounding is always grounding out a positive charge or a negative charge. So I mean, if somebody's trying to impact you in the wrong direction, because people have a creative charge that they might try to steer you and convince you to go in a direction that maybe is not resonating with you. So that could
Mhm.
be,
Clickbait, in other words.
yeah, that could be a positive charge in your direction, or you could look at it as a negative charge. Um, I guess that's what I would call grounding. Grounding to me is always grounding out worry or something in your environment that's trying to pull you out of a state of being of peace,
Okay.
or you're not peace in state of peace.
So what I think I hear you saying and relating grounding, it's like finding that stillness within.
Yeah. Always have access and being in that place so that you can listen, because that's
Mhm.
going to enable you to listen to what the source of whatever imbalance is in your environment, right?
Which is precipitated by inquiry. You've got to have the awareness, and then the inquiry as to why. And then you got to be able to shut up and listen, right?
Right.
Because most of the time, I
It's a
know for
skill.
me early on, my mind is just it works at thought speed, right? And it's funny. I had an experience that I felt like I was transported across time and space at the speed of thought, and it made me wonder what the speed of thought was. And the only place that I was able to find a reference to it was the Urantia book. And it said that, and this is in reference to a solitary messenger, which is a one who's able to travel at the speed of thought, 841 trillion miles per second.
Yeah. I think
So,
even those things are relative. I think thought is probably instantaneous. It's just there's really no way because you're always measuring things from a relative standpoint.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And teleportation, right? You think someplace and you're automatically there. There are those who've experienced it. I did one night, totally out of the blue, wasn't asking for it. It was one of those, I got up in the middle of the night, staying at a friend's house up in Prescott. And so over Christmas of 1989, I think it was. Um, I get up, I'm on the opposite side of the house from the bathroom. It's an old house up in the mountains and fairly large house. It was about 60 feet from my bedroom door to the bathroom door. And I had to go through, navigate through furniture in a couple of rooms to get there. So I wake up, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm kind of half conscious, right? And I open my bedroom door. It's dark. There was an archway, and I didn't think about it at the time. And so I step out. Evidently, it was probably a new moon as well because the house was totally dark. And I take two steps and I run into a wall. I'm like, what's going on? So I'm looking around. I find a light switch and I flip it on, and guess where I'm at? I'm in front of the bathroom door,
Right. Yeah.
just like that. Now, how the heck did I do that? Right? And how
Yeah.
can I repeat it? Well, it's not necessary. First of all, the only thing that was necessary was that I experience it to know it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think that, would you say that those kinds of experiences we often get caught up in and make a lifetime or a living from for some?
I think so. I think it's people try to ground out an experience and make it their whole career. For sure. I think people have done that before. I've had something similar, but I didn't dwell on it. I thought about it later and tried to figure out how and why it happened. Um, and I think it has more to do with you can visualize yourself in a different place and actually achieve that.
Hmm.
One interesting, really movie that I saw just recently that I hadn't seen in years, and it just came up just, and I said, you know what? I saw that with my mom years ago. It's called oh, it's an old Christopher Reeve movie with uh, what's the name of it? Something Time, has time in the title. And he goes back and sees Jane Seymour,
The
somebody that
Wrinkle in Time?
no, it
That's
was
a different one. Anyway.
yeah. So he actually travels back from 1979 to 1912 to go see somebody that had given him a watch and said, "Come back to me." It was an old lady that came to him. He was a screenplay writer, giving him a watch, said, "Hey, come back to me." And he didn't know who she was. And 8 years later, he went and stayed at this place called the Grand Motel. And he stayed there and he saw Jane Seymour's picture on the wall and just resonated with that picture. Started to kind of get obsessed with this person that he doesn't feel he'd never met before, but
Hmm.
what it felt like he knew her. And found out that she was the same woman that had given him the watch 8 years earlier at this thing. She was a performer just as he was, but lived in 1912, and she was at the hotel there playing there. So he actually goes back to an old professor, teaches this professor gives him an experience, says, yes, I do believe time travel is possible. And it was only because I felt like I was in that place at that time, and it was for a split second. And so he said, I don't know if I was really there, but that's what the process that I went through in order
Mhm.
to get there.
Well,
So
when you,
go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, in the, I don't know if you know or not, it's, um, thought forms, energy, experiences, they are indelible in the thoughtmosphere and are accessible occasionally through discipline or inquiry and being open to those kinds of things. I don't know that we actually have, because they're like remote viewing, right? You don't really travel there. However, you do go there. There's a part of you that carries your sensory capacity with it, yet is not tied to it.
Right.
And there's all kinds of things, it's one of the queries, and even in quantum physics now, I have a real difficult time with the guys with the many world theories, right? Because where do you experience things from? One point of awareness. I don't care where it is, it's still one point of awareness.
Yeah, you're never in two places at the same time. Yeah.
Unless you bilocate, but even then, there's still that one point of awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've done that. I had set up some experiments with a gal in Australia and one in Sweden. This is 20 years ago, just to see if, because I experienced it as a teenager. I had a friend of mine that was supposed to be back for winter quarter, wasn't, and we had done telepathic and different kinds of psychic experiments the year before. And so I went into one of those and I pictured his face. I looked into his eyes. I imagined grabbing his shoulders, standing him up. And I'm like, dude, where are you at? You're supposed to be back here now. And he was in a cabin of his grandfather's up in northern Canada, 2,000 miles away, north of Muncie, Indiana, is where I was. And then also his girlfriend and close friend of mine as well from the year prior, she came into that conversation as well. Didn't anticipate her. The three of us talked for a little bit. It dissipated, came back. I was listening to a song by White Witch called Help Me Lord. And music always seems to assist these kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I come back, don't think anything more about it. That was on a Saturday morning, called his parents' house the next Friday. He answers the phone out of breath. And I said, dude, you just got back. He said, yeah, I did. And he said, I knew it was you on the phone, so I ran in to answer it. I said, okay, so sounds like we still got the connection. He says, yeah. I said, a couple hours enough time. So we went over, a couple hours later, I went over to see him, talked to his parents for a little bit, got out in the car. I turned to him and I said, did you catch any flack last weekend? That's all I said. And he looks at me square in the eyes. And he says, yeah, you son of a bitch. You woke me up out of bed. I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, I was laying there sound asleep. Felt somebody grab me by the shoulders and set me up in bed. I opened my eyes up and there was your face in front of me. And behind yours was Carolyn's. We had a conversation. You split. I went back to bed. Okay. So then he shows up here. But he was always planning to come back for winter quarter. I just was wanting him there sooner. And week and a half later, postcard shows up in his mail, addressed to his home address, Carolyn's handwriting. It was from a Krishna camp in California, and their particular postcards had a list of the locations on it. The one in Santa Barbara was circled, And the only thing besides his address on that card was enjoyed the conversation.
Hmm.
And we were 19. So what do you do with that? Several years later, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this with a couple of people that I had
Start a
connected with.
telepathic club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all have the capacity. We just don't use it. We don't trust it because we don't work
Yeah.
with it to build the trust.
Yeah.
So this time I'm like, okay, I'm going to see what I can do. And I talked to these two. I said, close your eyes and I'm going to project an image and see what you get. Uh, I don't know if this is bilocating because one actually felt me touch her shoulders. The other one saw an image of my face, which is what I tried to project to her. Now, was that real or not? It was for that moment. These kinds of things to me are potential acceleration points for humanity in this process of learning self and inquiring about who we are and what we're really capable of. Because those kinds of things, there's no malevolence whatsoever capable in them, let alone displayed.
Yeah.
How does that land with you?
Well, yeah, it's just your own perception of what you think might be benevolent, or it, the if we're
Agreed, because those things that are good for you sometimes are a little uncomfortable.
right. Yeah, it's always a perception of what you're going through as to whether or not that's good for you. A lot of times the things that you think are good for you generally aren't, because it doesn't stress the body, because
Sure.
growth happens under stress.
Well, and then are you pushing or pulling energy? That would be the first indication, right? Are we self-aware enough to realize when we're projecting or trying to attract rather than setting attention, intention, and then interact as though it is happening?
Yeah.
That seems to be the core of that magic, if you will, which is, it's not really magic, it's science.
Yeah. Yeah, we're always talking to ourselves. We're never talking
Oh
to
my God, incessantly so.
yeah, you're never talking to anybody but yourself, right? You're
It just
always
depends on whether we do it out loud. Right.
right.
And I'm notorious for that. I'll talk, my wife will go, who the hell are you talking to? I'm like, me. I'm just talking to myself. I'm working stuff through because and this is one of the things about counseling, it doesn't really matter what the counselor says, the questions they ask and how you respond. Being able to listen to yourself, talk about yourself, gives you the opportunity to examine yourself. Because
Yeah,
nobody else is going to do it for you.
right. Yeah, my girlfriend constantly tells her, well, I had to go have a word with myself. When if she's ever in a situation, it's like, I had to go have a word with myself for a little while and straighten myself out.
Right.
So, yeah, yeah,
And we do that. And we laugh and joke about it, and it's laughable and jokeable. We need to take ourselves less seriously. We need to have fun with ourselves, right? Just be silly.
there is that dichotomy of oneness and individuality. It's always there. It's never, you're always flopping back, you and I are one, but we're individuals at the same time. It's always there.
Well, and it's how we choose to enjoy each other. Or
Yeah,
do we choose to enjoy each other?
right,
What's the pretense? Are we coming together to have a good time and accomplish stuff? Or are we coming together to accomplish stuff and maybe have a good time?
right. If you're always worried about an outcome, yeah, it's always going to be some kind of stress. You're never
Mhm.
enjoying the moment. Yeah, for sure.
So knowing all of this, and wow, we have just had a great conversation and time has flown by.
Yeah, I think we've covered over an hour. We've been here for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, but and wonderful. I love it when things like this happen because it's all flow. It's a generative conversation that just simply flows and we go all kinds of directions, hopefully to the benefit of our audience, at
Right.
least to the benefit of us, right? Because we enjoy it. We want to engage things that bring us joy and happiness,
Yeah.
right? And more often, moreover, it really is not just about joy and happiness. It's about those two core things that most of us never talk about, and that's to love and be loved,
Yeah.
which is really our core mission, how to learn to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. And loving everyone despite of whatever's going on. Because if you're, yeah,
The only way you can do that's with your, loving yourself first.
yeah,
Stop being, judge, critical, that
yeah,
self-condemnatory, you know, beat yourself up with your own hammer, right? It might be Maxwell's and it might be silver. However, you don't have to beat yourself up with it.
yeah.
Um, what do you find, or how would you suggest that folks be able to tap into this, use it on a personal, professional, and even business level? Because I know you deal with that.
Yeah, it's all about you're always challenging yourself to you're always reconciling with yourself. You're never if you can't reconcile with somebody else, it has nothing to do with them. It's all about you, or yourself. I think that's the main message we're all trying to get through here.
And
It's
have the most argument with.
right. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's, an audience out there going, yeah, um, try it. Don't believe anything we've talked about.
Right.
Just try it for yourself. See what happens,
Go
right?
jump out there and just start serving the people around you and just see what happens.
Yeah. Ask what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you.
Right, exactly. You forgot the finger.
Yeah. This has been wonderful, Brian. I really appreciate your
I
time.
appreciate it too, Zen.
Is there any parting one-liner you'd like to offer to our audience as a parting gift?
Oh boy. The name of that movie is Somewhere in Time, but you're always in time. You're never out of time. Yeah.
And there's always enough time.
Yeah, there's always enough time.
Cool. I appreciate it. Brian, namaste and in la catch. And thanks for listening into this episode of One World in a New World. I trust you've enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.